Today we're here with a 2017 Lexus RX. We're going to be installing the Hamilton Motor Company Apple CarPlay conversion kit in this vehicle. This kit is a brand new replacement 12-inch screen. Whether your vehicle was originally equipped with the 8-inch screen or the 12-inch screen, you're going to be getting this brand new 12-inch screen from Hamilton Motor Company here. The screen is fully touchscreen and it'll also work with your original knob or original mouse. We're going to show you the complete installation. Today also we're going to film an overview video that'll show you the features of the kit, as well as a video that'll show you how to set up CarPlay and set up audio the first time. If you've already bought the kit and you're getting it going, we recommend watching that video after this video so you know how to properly configure the audio and CarPlay. Of course, our customer support team is here to help anytime. Give us a call at 919-858-2890 if you need us. We sell these kits for almost every model of Lexus and Toyota. Let's get going. To begin, we need to put the car in neutral. Go ahead and power it on. Hold the brake, shift it to neutral, and turn it off. To turn power off to the vehicle, we need to remove the negative battery cable. Use a 10mm socket to loosen the negative battery cable. Take it off the battery post and set it aside. Inside the vehicle, we're going to go ahead and remove this gray leather covered trim panel here. Reach up under it from the back, pop it loose, and work your way forwards, freeing all the clips. Make sure they all stay in place. We'll go ahead and set this aside. Next, we need to remove this metal look-alike trim here. I have these cheap microfiber rags I order in bulk on Amazon. They're very inexpensive and they protect your hands and make it easier. I'm going to grab the trim right here. I'm kind of slotting my finger under it. I'm just going to pull out. This trim is very tough. The Lexus plastic is really tough. You're not going to mess anything up. We'll set it aside now. Then we're going to proceed to remove this trim piece right here that has the start-stop button. I'll take my rag. I'll start up at the top. I'll pop it loose. And I'll move down the vehicle. And just like that, it's going to come free. There's going to be a wiring harness behind the start-stop button. You'll press a tab with your finger, disconnect the harness from right there. Now we're going to take out this trim panel. It's the leather covered piece on the driver's side. Simply reach over it here, fold it out, pop it free. Once again, make sure all your trim clips stay in place. We'll set it aside. We are now going to remove two bolts holding in the radio. There's one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side. We're going to access it through this panel here. You can note the angle of my ratchet. You see how it's going up into the vehicle. And it's going to be a 10mm bolt. I'm using an extension and a deep 10mm socket. You don't need the deep socket, you only need the extension for this. So here's the angle. The bolt is approximately right in here. We'll show it to you once we get the radio out. That'll help you visualize it a little better since it's hard for the camera to see the bolt in there. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen it. When you've got it fully loose, we'll turn the extension a little more vertical and lower that bolt right out. Then collect it and set it in a safe place. We'll repeat this process on the driver's side.
We're now going to repeat that process on the driver's side. The driver's side bolt is much easier to see and access. I'm once again using a 10mm deep socket. That's not necessary, but the extension definitely is. And over here, you get a really good visual on the bolt. So I'm just going to use my ratchet to back it all the way out. And then as it gets loose, just start to be a bit more gentle. Once again, you'll turn that vertical and drop it right out.
Now, take your fingers, press down around the shift boot, and we're going to thread the shift knob off the vehicle counterclockwise. Then, on this vehicle, you have a mouse. The mouse is the one that moves all around. I say to customers, forward, back, side to side. It also presses in. The knob looks very similar, but the knob would spin around and just press in. If you have the mouse version, your version of the kit, is going to have a harness that we need to connect physically under the mouse. So if you have the mouse version, you're going to do 2 connections behind the radio and 1 under the mouse. We'll show it to you. If you have the knob version, you don't have to connect anything under the knob. You would just have 1 additional connection behind the radio. We'll show you both of these. So I'm going to go ahead now. This is the mouse car. The other easy way to tell if you have the mouse or the knob, generally the folks with the mouse will have a factory 12-inch display, whereas the folks with the knob would have only the factory 8-inch display. So if you have the mouse, you're going to go ahead and grab this whole assembly and just gently rock it back and forth. Pop it free from the vehicle, and then it'll slot out kind of like a shoehorn. Turn it upside down. Go ahead and disconnect it. Set it in a safe place. We're going to use a thick Phillips head screwdriver. Thicker screwdrivers will get better leverage here. A little tiny thin screwdriver won't get good leverage, and we're going to take out 2 Phillips head screws. On the mouse version, we're going to remove these 2 Phillips head screws, 1, 2, and this is so that we can loosen the whole center console cover and run a wire under the mouse. If you have the knob version vehicle, you don't need to run any wires under here, so you don't need to do this step. This is only for the mouse version vehicles. We'll set both of these screws in a safe place. If you had the knob version vehicle, you'll go ahead to the next step where we remove the central control unit, the factory radio. For the mouse version vehicle, we need to pop loose the center console. I'm going to use my rags once again here to protect my hands, to protect the center console, and I'm just going to go up and back. And just like that, it will go ahead and pop loose. With the center console cover loose, we're going to disconnect just the 3 wiring harnesses up front, and I'll show them to you in a second. They're a little bit on the trickier side to see on the camera. So we've disconnected those, and then what we'll be able to do is just twist the center console cover, and we'll leave it just sitting here. So we disconnected 1, 2, 3, and we'll just set this right here in the passenger seat. Once again, these were the 3 we disconnected. We did this just by pressing down on the tabs. I disconnected these just to make room. On the knob vehicle, you won't need to do this, but on the mouse vehicle, we need to run this harness. And I'm gonna reach in on either side of this little trim box under here, and I'm just gonna pop it loose. There's 1 harness on the top to disconnect. That's for a small light. And there's just 1 harness behind the cigarette lighter to disconnect. The main harness simply was clipped onto the bottom. Slide that clip off. We'll set this box aside. We'll put a rag over the gear shift so that it's a softer surface. Then we're going to reach using our other rags here on either side of the factory head unit. Wiggle back and forth just like that. We'll pop it free. This harness for the clock will hold you up, so go ahead and disconnect that. We'll set that down here. Now we have easy access to all the wiring, and we'll do that in just a second. We're going to move up top for right now, and we're going to go ahead and start changing out the screen. You can use a credit card or a trim pry tool to get between this slit here and simply pop up. You want to wait until you hear the trim tabs click out. Then reach in with your hands and remove it. Now we are going to remove both of these nuts holding on the factory screen. Your standard 10mm socket is most likely deep enough, but the deep socket's really nice because, as you can see, the bolt sticks through that nut a little bit. So you can order a deep 10mm socket on Amazon really cheap. You may consider doing that. I always like to use the deep sockets. And we'll remove the nut on the driver's side and do the same thing on the passenger side. We now need to remove this trim panel behind the factory screen. You can either use a trim tool and pop under it from the sides or a credit card. My preferred method for doing it, I'll grab the whole screen and try to rock it loose. Now you're not going to be able to take the whole screen out yet because there's another bolt holding it in the back, but this process will generally pop up the back trim panel here. You can slide it off the unit just like this. There's 1 more nut to take off behind the screen. The bolt and these 2 nuts removed. Keep in mind there's 2 tabs holding the screen, so we'll pop it fully loose. Twist it around. Now be very careful not to let these metal parts touch your dash or they could scratch it. We'll press down the tab. We'll take the black one off, the blue one, and then we'll pop the whole wiring harness off from right here. Now we'll remove the screen and set it in a safe place. I'm gonna wire up this unit. Once again, we're on a Lexus RX here that has the mouse and no 360 cameras. If yours has the 360 camera, you'll check back on our manuals page for that 360 camera wiring supplement. You would have had a blue and a white square wire from the back of the screen with the 360 cameras. I'm going to talk a bit about the wiring. This large tan harness will plug into the back of the new screen. This harness labeled OEM mic, we're going to plug it into the corresponding female mic harness that I'll show you in just a little bit. This harness labeled speaker is going to plug into the little included speaker. And now we'll talk about some of the bigger harnesses back here. Now there's a wiring diagram on our manuals page for both the knob and the mouse versions. If you want to see the knob version, our older video, and now our older videos are not as nice as these new videos, but our older video for the RX was in fact a knob version. So this is going to be the main power harness. We're going to connect it behind the central control unit, and it's labeled power wire. On the knob version, this will be much smaller. This one is labeled 4HU audio, that means 4 head unit audio, and this would be approximately the same on the knob version. It's going to connect right here. We'll show you that in just a bit. Coming back over here, you're going to have a couple more harnesses. Once again, the wiring diagram, it'll come in your box. It's also available on our website, and it'll make this a lot clearer. This pink wire is labeled camera power. Keep this connected together. This one here, labeled monitor, has a male and a female. On the knob harness, it would be labeled OEM camera, and you would only have the female. On this mouse version, the male is not going to be used. The female is going to connect into this black connector that was in the back of the factory screen. Finally, you're going to have these two little harnesses labeled only for mouse and only for touchpad. The Lexus touchpad is used in the RC as well as the NX. It's the same software as the mouse, so that's why we use a very similar harness. We tape off the only for touchpad on this model for the RX. You will not use this at all. The only for mouse is on a long T, and we're going to route it and connect it physically under the mouse. On the knob version, instead of having one that connects physically under the knob, you're not going to be connecting anything under the knob. You're going to have one harness that'll also plug into the back of the head unit. So we're going to make 2 connections behind the head unit here and 1 under the mouse. On the knob version, you'd make 3 connections behind the head unit. This one here is a little wire that has a couple pins, red, black, and a gray. This would be your power wire for your 360 box if your car had a 360 camera. We're also going to include what we call the accessory harness here. It's going to plug into the back of the screen right here. It's going to have one yellow RCA labeled camera. And that yellow RCA is going to plug into the male yellow RCA from the primary harness. It'll have a USB port. This is going to be for your wired CarPlay. It'll have this female labeled mic, black. And that's going to plug into the male labeled mic from our main harness. We recommend when you connect this RCA and the 3.5mm wire, cover them in electrical tape. And finally, these ones labeled UART, this extra yellow female RCA, are not going to be used, okay? This SIM card, these devices carrier approval pending in the States. This would be for a SIM card if you wanted to add a data connection to the device. That will be coming in the future. You're going to have this GPS antenna. This will plug straight into the back of the new unit. This blue LVDS wire is going to go straight into the back of the new screen. Finally, if you had the 360 box, there's a wire labeled 360 control coming off the accessory harness and 360 control coming off our main harness. If and only if you have the 360 box, you'd connect these together. Once again, reference that wiring diagram for the 360 camera. If it's equipped, it's on our website on the manuals page. We're going to start by routing this USB for the wired CarPlay. You're going to have a couple options for this. What I would recommend as one option, you can drill a small hole in this box and you can route it into the trim box so it'll sit right under your factory radio. You can also drill a small hole in the side of your glove box and you can route it into your glove box. Or you can simply have it pop out from the trim between the passenger seat and the center console. And that's what we're gonna do in this case. So we're gonna go ahead and route it from up top, down through here. Then we're gonna go under this plastic cross member. I want to go ahead and set it down here, and we will position that at the end. I'm gonna make two connections behind the factory head unit. We're going to take off this large power wire. You use your fingernail and push in a little tab in here, and then you lift up on the gray bar. This wire will come right out. And we're going to remove this one right here. This one has the light blue and pink colors. And we'll take the Hamilton female here. We're going to plug that main power wire into the Hamilton female. Make sure it snaps into place. We'll take the Hamilton male. We'll plug it into the back of the unit right here. Make sure it clicks into place. Now we're going to take the Hamilton wire labeled 4 HU audio. Once again, that's 4 head unit audio. This one we're going to plug into the back of the Hamilton harness right here. We're going to take the Hamilton male. We'll connect it right here into the head unit. We're now going to take this T labeled monitor and we're going to take it from the central cavity up top. Anything going up top from the central cavity needs to go under this plastic cross member here so that when we reinstall the radio, it doesn't get in the way. So make sure that you don't have any wiring running on top of this. We'll take this T, we'll feed it up here through the dash. And we'll bring with it the yellow RCA labeled camera. We'll connect the yellow RCA, the male labeled camera, to the female labeled camera from the accessory harness that we already have up here. Make sure the pink wires for camera power are still connected. We're going to take the female side of this one labeled monitor, again, this is on the mouse version vehicle. We're going to connect it to the male black connector that was in the back of the factory screen. This male side from our harness, the Hamilton harness, will never be used. On the knob version, this would be labeled OEM camera instead of monitor, and there would only be a female side. Back under here, we've connected the speaker to the male power wire for the new screen here. We're going to leave the speaker behind the factory radio. That speaker is so that we can mix navigational sounds into your factory satellite, FM, and AM radios. So when you're not using the SiriusXM app, if you want to use satellite radio proper, or you want to listen to FM or AM while you have CarPlay up, if you want navigation going also, the voice will talk out of that speaker. We're now going to take this male, and we're going to take the microphone harness as well. We're going to feed these through our channel so that they appear up top. Once these are up top, we're going to take the female 3.5 millimeter labeled microphone and this one labeled OEM mic. We plug them up here. This system is going to use the factory microphone. So our system is one of the few. It'll integrate with the factory microphone. You won't have any loss of audio quality on the phone. 3 wires we need up top. That main power wire labeled monitor power, the accessory power wire here, and the blue LVDS. So we're going to take this mouse wire here, and we're going to route it behind this large plastic bracket in here. Then reach in with your other hand, pull it down through. This will allow us to get the wire only for mouse down where we need it without it interfering with the factory head unit. Just like that, we've got the harness down here. You can see how we routed it around this large plastic bracket. It's coming down under here. On the knob version, you won't need to do this. You don't need to route anything under this bracket. So this is only the mouse version. We've routed the one labeled mouse behind here. It's coming out down here. In just a second, we'll run it to the mouse. We're gonna put this GPS antenna behind the factory head unit. The placement of this one is not very important. This antenna is mainly for picking up GPS signals for things like setting your time automatically, or if you have a weather app that wants to locate where you are. iPhone GPS will be used for all CarPlay. And we'll take this blue connector, we'll feed it up top, where it'll come out here, and plug into the back of the factory screen. Once again, we want to make sure that nothing is going over this plastic crossmember here. Now with that complete, we can go ahead and start organizing and tucking the wires back in here. We're going to take this USB, we're going to route it behind this plastic bracket just like we did for the only for mouse harness, and pop it out the bottom here. You can meet it with your other hand. It's easiest to kind of use two hands and work it down bit by bit. We're going to put it between the center console and the passenger seat. Like we said, you can also put it between the glove box. You don't have to use it at all. You can drill a hole, put it in the glove box. You could drill a hole in the bottom of the trim box, put it in the bottom of the trim box here. It's going to pop out right here for this customer. You can see how we've routed it completely around this plastic bracket, so it's not going to get in the way of remounting the factory head unit. Now, we're going to lift up the factory head unit, go ahead and reconnect the clock harness. And we're going to tuck the wires in behind the head unit as we work it into its place. You don't want to be applying too much pressure on the head unit. If you are, it means that you may have something caught between one of the brackets and the head unit. You may also have even a tiny wire between the head unit and that plastic cross member. But we'll snap it in on both the driver and passenger sides. We'll take a little bit of pressure. Careful not to put the pressure on the buttons, but put it on these large plastic areas that are the strongest. Just like this, you can see the head unit sitting in here. This is what you want to see. We've got the speaker hanging out down under here. But this is what you want to see. You don't want the head unit popping itself out. That means there's wires that are being crimped or something like that. So make sure it's sitting. It doesn't even need the bolts at all. And that's what you want to see. Then we'll put the bolts in at the end. It's now time to connect the mouse. We've got this harness labeled only for mouse under here. Once again, the one labeled touchpad is taped off. If you had the knob vehicle, you would not be doing this step. You would have had one extra connection behind the factory radio. Our original video is for the knob vehicle. We're going to take the factory mouse harness, we'll plug it into the female side of the Hamilton harness, labeled only for mouse. Make sure you hear it snap. And this male side is going to go into the mouse when we reconnect it. If you don't do this, your system will not work properly, and you'll need to give us a call, and then we're going to tell you to do it. So make sure you do that step. We're now going to take these little red clips off the factory trim panel that goes behind the factory screen. In just a second, we're going to transfer them onto that new trim panel that goes behind the new screen. By one, we're going to transfer these red clips onto the new trim panel. You want to make sure that they snap into place and don't stay loose. We're going to make a couple connections back here, starting with the GPS. We'll connect this blue LVDS right here. Be gentle with this wire. You don't want to stress it or mess it up. And then we're going to connect this large power wire here. Make sure you hear it snap in. And then the accessory harness is going to connect right here. Make sure you hear that snap in. Now we're going to take the new screen. We're going to pull the wiring behind it. And we're going to set it down onto its brackets. What we're going to do next is begin organizing the wiring so that the screen will sit flush. At this stage, when you have the new screen connected and everything's still available and loose here where you can access it, go ahead and plug in every wiring harness you've disconnected, leaving the bolts out and leaving everything accessible. Turn the car on, test your backup camera, test to make sure that when you hold the menu button on the front of your mouse or knob, you can cycle between the OEM screen and the new Hamilton screen. Make sure that when you put it in reverse, that backup camera comes up and goes away. Make sure your steering wheel controls work, and make sure your knob or mouse is working both in the original side and in the new Hamilton side. This is very important. If you call us, we can help you now. If you missed a wiring connection or missed something, we can walk you through it. But if you've already put the bolts back on, it'll be a bigger pain in the butt for you to go through and test everything again. So One of the things that we would recommend is make sure that you test everything while it's still open here. We'll test the audio. You're going to want your audio to be on the auxiliary mode, and long holding the menu button in front of the mouse for 3 seconds, same with the knob, is how you cycle between that original screen and the new Hamilton screen. We're now going to reinstall those 2 nuts on the front, and then we'll reinstall this bolt here on the back of the unit. We're now going to tighten these 2 nuts on the front of the head unit. It's best to get them all fairly tight and then run back down at the end and give each one just that little extra snug down, but don't tighten them fully down one by one. Installing this panel, you need to look back here and make sure that there's no wires poking out in any unusual position. You want to make sure that all the wires are going to fit nicely behind this panel. Otherwise, when you're putting it on, you'll have the trim clips jump off on you. So if that happens, you need to take the panel back off, reorganize the wires, and then shoot it again. Close to the end, there's a bit of pressure required across the top clips and bottom, and you'll hear a definitive snap when it clicks into place. We're now going to transfer these 3 red trim clips from the original front trim to the new front trim piece. Make sure they click into place. All 3 trim clips in the new Hamilton front trim piece, we're going to transfer it and install it below the new screen. You slot the front in first, and then shoehorn the back in. Make sure that you hear all of them clip into place. We'll go ahead and reattach the wiring harness loom to the bottom of this trim box here. We'll reconnect the back of the cigarette lighter, this blue one, and as we reposition the trim box into place, make sure these wires don't get caught on it, we'll reconnect the top little light here as well. Now take the trim box, line it back up into its socket, and press the clips into place. Now I'm going to reinstall the 10mm bolts on both sides of the factory head unit. Once again, you can reference earlier in the video to see where they are, but they're at this sort of angle. We'll now reinstall the bolt on the passenger side also. We will now reconnect the 3 harnesses under the center console. Take the center console cover, gently thread the gear shift back into the shift boot. And maneuver the center console cover back into its place, making sure that this wire for the mouse is accessible through the mouse slot. We will then snap it into place to retighten the 2 screws underneath the mouse socket. Reconnect the Hamilton male harness to the bottom of the mouse. If you have the knob, once again, this was not necessary. And we will take the mouse and shoehorn it back into its socket and snap it into place. We will reconnect this trim panel holding the engine start stop button, line it up, and snap it into place. We will now reinstall this metal look-alike trim panel. Now we will reinstall the leather covered trim panels on either side of the center console. We will now reinstall the panel on the passenger side, setting this USB cord concealed between the passenger seat and the center console. This cord can also be placed in the glove box or in this center trim box here. Finally, thread the shift knob back onto the gear shift and reinstall the shift boot. Go ahead and reinstall the negative battery cable onto the battery terminal and tighten it down. And that concludes our installation video in the 2017 Lexus RX. We're also going to have a video on our YouTube channel called How to Set Up the Audio and Configure Apple CarPlay. We highly recommend you watching that video before using the kit for the first time. All wiring diagrams are available on our manuals page. Of course, you can check out our website, hamiltonmotorcompany.com. We sell these kits for almost every model of Lexus and Toyota.